of all the money's tied up in inventories, and that has now changed. The stockpiles are going up again. Do you communicate these decisions to the railroads ahead of time so that they can they can prepare to change their operations?
We do communicate on a regular basis with the railroads. Per se, we don't let them know when we're changing our inventory targets or levels, but what we do communicate, and this is different for each utility depending upon what their contract states or what their tariff might state, but a normal provision would be that at least 3 to 4 months before the beginning of each year, we would give the railroad the tonnages that we expect to move on a monthly basis for the upcoming 12-month period. And within that, that would allow them to plan for the amount of coal that we're going to move. And at the same time, we talk with our railroad representatives on a regular basis, and we'll talk about out-year projections, where we're going, whether we foresee any significant increases in the tonnages that we plan on shipping even out 3, 4, 5 years from now.
So they should be able to forecast that increase and act accordingly.
We have never not provided the railroad any information that they've asked for related to the tons to be moved.
One of the things the railroads point out to is that many of the contracts that they have with moving coal are legacy contracts which are 15, 20 years old.
Sure.
And during those times, there have been relatively small increases and sometimes no increases at all in the rates. Wouldn't you expect to see a substantial increase in rates after a 20-year period where the rates were flat?
It depends on the type of rate. Again, if it were a legacy rate, and again, I'm speaking just from my own knowledge, I can't speak for all contracts, but a significant number of contracts did have what are called adjustment factors related to the RCAF. So to the extent the railroads incur increasing cost on an annual basis, those are being passed through annually through the rate adjustment. So when you get to the end of a period, no, I would not expect a significant increase in the rates.
I was at a conference a while back, Monday actually, in Duluth, where I was on a panel with the Association of American Railroads and CURA, and I felt like the voice of reason in the middle of but one of the things that the AAR pointed out was with regard to electric utility rates. Since 1980, electric utility rates have gone up, I think, 30–40% in real terms, whereas the coal rate, the rate to the coal companies, the utilities for hauling the coal, in real terms again, has gone down. So that's about 60% of what it was in real terms in 1980. Doesn't that argue that rates are down, that they have been much more, quote-unquote, reasonable with regard to their customers than the electric companies have?
Well, again, any time that you want to get into a discussion about revenue or rates, I think that you have to also look at cost. And again, while I can't speak for all utilities, I can speak for mine. At Kansas City Power and Light, before last year, our last rate case was in 1985. From 1985 through 2006, we had 3 rate decreases for our customers, and that was a natural function of our costs were going down. Every 3 to 4 years, the commissions would come in, they would go through our books, see what our costs were, and then we would reduce our price. So from a KCPL standpoint, I can tell you that is not the case. What is happening now, we are experiencing some increases, as we talked about yesterday, at wind generation, as we invest in energy efficiency programs, as we build additional coal plants. But again, I think if you want to talk about price increases, you have to look at what the underlying costs are doing associated with that product.
Mr. Lindeman, you brought a national view of the issue.
Yeah. Mr. Mulvey, the thing that I would add here is bear in mind what the AAR does not include in their cost of coal transportation. They don't include the cost of power generators, investment in loop track, in unloaders, in rail cars, and as you saw yesterday, we've got a lot of money on the barrel that's been there. We are the ones who will have to add loop track to be able to accommodate 150 car trains if the railroads ever move to standardizing on that level, which we understand they're trying to. The other thing from a strategic perspective that I would offer to you is at least twice annually, the CEOs of our industry, the CEOs of the coal industry, and the CEOs of the railroads all sit down together in a meeting room and talk. It's usually done under the aegis of the Edison Electric Institute and our coal-based generation stakeholders group because of environmental issues that are common to the three, but they do sit down and talk. And that's a time when the strategic issues and discussion does take place.
There was some discussion of the railroad's reliability, but the railroads have often claimed that the reliability problem, especially over the last couple of years, has not really been a railroad problem for the most part, but it's been more of a mine problem, and it's the mines that have been unable to deliver the coal to the railroads, that they have the trains sitting there waiting to be loaded, and the mine operations are just unable to do that, to get the cars loaded, to get the trains moving, and it's more their problem than the railroad's problem. Would you agree with that?
No. I think that it's...
That's a quick, good answer.
Well, any time you point the blame in any one direction, I would argue it's going to be incorrect. As someone mentioned earlier, and as the NCTA we've talked about, it is a three-legged stool, with each one dependent upon the other. Are there problems with each one of those groups at times? Yes. There are times where the mines have problems, when they have floods in their pits, when the slough goes down in, when conveyors break down, that they're not able to fill the trains as they come in. That does happen. Do the railroads have significant problems at times? The answer is yes. The service crisis of mid-2005, and I won't leave the utilities out. There are times we have problems. Right now we have a stacker reclaimer that's has structural issues with it, and so we're restricting the loads for 6 to 8 weeks. So can I tell you that which part of that piece has the greatest impact? I can't say. Each one does have an impact. It's an ongoing part of the business. And again, I think all of us as utilities, as railroads, and as mines have to build our businesses to where we can handle those problems as they occur and recover from them.
Well, every industry, of course, is going to have downtimes, is going to have equipment failures. That's expected. Industries like the railroads and the mines are going to be subject to weather problems. That needs to be factored in to anybody's planning and what they need in terms of stockpiles and what they feel to be reliable. I mean, reliability is not that you get every single delivery at every time exactly, but you get everything that could be expected given the stochastic events of weather and other outages. But when you say that the railroads are unreliable or question the reliability of the railroads, what is the problem above and beyond these things that you would have expected in any operation that's similar to how a railroad operates? What are they doing wrong, in other words?
Well, when you say what are they doing wrong, they're trying to supply an ever-increasing demand. And what I felt, this is the Dave LaFerre view of what was wrong in the 2003-2004 timeframe, was that even though PRB demand was continuing to grow, even though the forecast from CANAC, from EIA, from everyone else said that demand was going to continue to grow out of the PRB, capital investments and crew manpower was actually reduced during that period of time due to a short-term slowdown in that growth rate. And so when we tried to recover in 2004, there were problems associated with crews, there's problems associated with locomotive power, there's problems associated with track space. And then we were unfortunately hit with the derailments in 2005, which exacerbated the problem.
Mr. Lindeman?
The other part of that I would note, Mr. Mulvey, is that we've got a situation in the country where we are being held to service standards. Cycle times, as I am told, are not improving. I've checked in recent weeks the AAR's transit times and speed times on their unit trains, and basically it's the same as it was in 04 and 05, with some degree of change is yet to be certain. And what that says to me is that in our industry, where we have standards that we have to meet in terms of hertz and cycles and very technical standards of electric quality, and where you can't take your the number of cycles per minute that a generator is producing cannot deviate beyond a certain level without shorting out or burning up equipment. We find it difficult to understand why there can't be a greater set of standards that apply to the rail industry.
In your testimony, Dave, you talked about the reporting requirements and asking for the STB to have more reporting requirements of railroad with regard to cycle times. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Well, where we were heading, where I was heading with that is that historically that was something we wouldn't have asked for from the STB because it was handled in the contracts that were negotiated between the parties. Unfortunately, with the public pricing tariffs that are coming out, most of those provisions are being gutted. And so if we can't get commercially reasonable terms on a contractual basis, we're asking that the STB provide some resemblance of that. And so we would be looking for what we talked about, cycle time performance, some type of standard that the railroad should be able to perform to, and to the extent they don't, that there are some compensation for that.
Mr. Lindeman?
I would agree with what Dave's observations there, and it's cycle time, it's contract terms, it's all become moved into a more transparent arena with the way the gas industry has moved over the last 10 or 15 years, the way the electric industry is moving, so that the public can understand what costs make up the components of what it is paying for fuel and generation, the way in which we serve the public. There's one of the things that happened in the development of standards in the energy industry was the Gas Industry Standards Board was formed about 15 or 20 years ago to help the gas industry move through deregulation, was setting up bulletin boards, electronic bulletin boards, so that they could handle the release of the capacity release on the pipelines for the use during the off season when the local distribution companies were not using gas full time in the summertime, that they could sell that capacity and make some money on that capacity that they didn't need at a given point in time. That was handled on an electronic bulletin board basis so that people could bid on it that way. It's those kinds of things that we see that are needed in the rail industry is more transparency and an understanding of what's available, capacity that's available. It doesn't mean more regulation, but it's opportunities to do better, to do business better.
Thank you. That's it for now.
Thank you, sir. As I understand it, the power grid in this country is divided into two segments. It's the eastern segment and the western segment.
Plus add in Texas. Texas falls as a third reliability region that is separate from the east and the west.
Right, and that allergies are cured. It cannot be cured across that border. They have to be cured by power generation and distribution systems in the east or power distribution systems in the west. They cannot cross over that great divide, if you will.
That's true.
That's the way it's currently set up.
That's the way it's currently
There are those who think that something should be done to make it possible for power to cross that great divide, so to speak, at 2 or 3 different points for obvious reasons. Is there any progress toward doing that?
Mr. Buttry, there's not any specific progress that I can point to towards doing that, but I would hasten to add that there are efforts underway in the Great Plains states to develop new high voltage transmission to take and move large amounts of wind generated electricity into eastern markets that are on the east side of the interconnection divide, so that as a way to help develop the wind industry in the country, as well as to meet, in some cases, state renewable portfolio standards, and in other cases, to beef up the grid.
But that capability, however, is limited by the fact that the voltage that can be produced is diminished the further it has to go.
That's right. Now, we do transfer large blocks of power in there are 2 very strong direct current transmission lines in the country. One runs from the Washington-Oregon border on the Columbia River southward to Los Angeles. Basically, it's nonstop power that's a 750 kilowatt direct current line. The other direct current line that I am aware of in the country is one that runs from the middle of North Dakota towards the Twin Cities, that takes some of the excess power that's produced up there by Basin Electric and others down to the Twin Cities for that. And I'm sorry, I don't have the voltage figure on that in my headed at this point, and we are in the process of struggling in Washington to build to one of the things that the Energy Policy Act did not do in '05 was it created a backstop arrangement by which the federal government can push the states towards the approval of new transmission lines that are called energy interest corridors. It did not go as far as your authority in permitting railroads with providing you eminent domain, nor as far as the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission has in eminent domain for gas pipelines, for interstate service. And that assembling new transmission corridors is probably one of our most difficult challenges to building up the electric infrastructure in the country, sir. Whether it be for transfer from electricity generated by new coal units, new wind units, or any other new generating technology that we would put in place.
Let me see if you would